Alright, first of all, apologies for the lack of videos recently. I kinda had to take a break for some college stuff, but anyways, with the start of the second half banners for this patch, we are getting Phainon, Mighty, and Cypher as reruns. And given how Star Rail's meta works, it's never really recommended to go for rerun units, unless they are a support or they complete any of your already present teams. But even with that, there is a character that I would recommend to any player who needs a solid damage dealer at the moment, even someone who is just starting out, and that is Phainon. In this video, I'll first give you a very quick TLDR of his kit and builds, and then I'll be explaining why I recommend him as a DPS for anyone, especially to a new player. I'll also be talking about vertical investment if you already have him. So leave a like if you find this video helpful, and let's get started. This video is sponsored by LD Shop, a safe and reliable game top-up site. From the creators of one of the best emulators, LD Player, it offers affordable prices in most game items through official ways. Like games such as Honkai Star Rail and Genshin Impact top-ups are purchased from Razer Gold, so you don't have to worry about getting banned. Something I can testify for myself, as I have been using it for my monthly supply passes. It also does not require any of your account information, just the user ID and server. You just hop into LD Shop, select your preferred game, select the pack, then type your UID and server, and then just click on top up, select your preferred payment option, and that's basically it. Within a moment, you get your jades. It's a fast and easy process with tons of positive reviews. And also, if you are someone who regularly spends on the game, there's a VIP system that rewards you with a free express supply pass if you spend over $80 a month. Also, if you use my link, you'll be getting free coupons for even more discounts. I know you'll be spending for your favorite character, so why not do yourself a favor and save some money? Just click on the link in the description or in the pinned comment and check out LD Shop. So, most of you already know how Phainon works, but here is a quick overview for anyone who doesn't. Phainon is a physical destruction unit whose core gameplay is to generate core flames, which are the unique points that he requires for his ultimate. He gains these points through various sources, such as his own attacks and when his teammates use any ability on him. When he reaches the 12 required core flames, he activates his ultimate, which transforms him to his new form. In this form, he gains various damage amplifying buffs and all his teammates leave the field. While in this state, he gains 8 extra turns with fixed speed based on his base speed, where the last extra turn is an automatic explosion attack, and after those turns, his transformation ends. He also gains 3 new attacks, 1 enhanced basic attack and 2 enhanced skill that he uses based on the situation, and also gains another point system that increases his damage called Scorch. As for the 3 attacks, the first one is the enhanced basic attack that deals damage to 3 targets and generate 2 Scorch points. The second one is the counter attack skill that makes all the enemies attack Phainon, and after them he launches a counter attack dealing damage to all enemies. This attack generates 1 Scorch points for every enemy present on the field. And finally, the last one is the bounce attack skill. As it says, it's a bounce attack, meaning it deals instances of damage to random targets based on the number of Scorch points he has. And if he has 4 points, then it additionally deals AoE damage to all enemies. This attack is Phainon's highest damage ability, and with this, you kinda get the idea of how his gameplay loop works. When inside his transformation state, you have 8 extra turns. Well, not really, it's actually 7 turns because the 8th one is an explosion attack, but throughout those 7 turns, you will be generating Scorch points by using either his enhanced basic attack or his counter attack skill. And after you have 4 points, you can use the bounce attack that deals the most damage. You do all this for 7 turns, and then he does his explosion attack, and that ends the transformation. And then you just repeat the cycle by once again generating core flames to activate his ultimate. A few other things to note here is that all the buffs that Phainon has when he enters his transformation will remain active for all of the 8 extra turns. So even though all of his teammates leave the field when he enters the state, he wouldn't really need them because all of the buffs will stay active for the whole duration of his ultimate. This also means you can't really use any secondary DPS with him because they will leave the field when Phainon activates his ultimate. And because of this, you always want to play him with 3 other supports, and that also means you can't really use any sustain with him. Now most of the time you wouldn't really need a sustain because he also gets an HP boost inside his ultimate, and every one of his attacks heals him a bit. And since his teammates are out of the field, they don't get hit by the enemies either, so even they don't need any kind of sustain. Now that's usually the case, but with game modes like the Anomaly Arbitration and all the new enemies who hits really hard, you might need a sustain. And for those situations, you do have a unit that can provide shields even inside his ultimate. I'll talk about that more when I explain his teams. But that's basically it. This is everything you need to know about Phainon's core gameplay. So how do we build this guy? Well, it's extremely simple. For Lightcones, there are basically two options. There is the signature, which increases Phainon's base speed by 12, gives him 18% defense ignore, and 60% damage boost at S1. Now this is of course his best in slot. It gives huge damage increase. Given Phainon already gets so much damage boost and attack increases from his ultimate, a different type of buff like the defense ignore scales way better for his damage. Also, the base speed is great for his extra turns to be slightly faster. Now if I were to explain it better, as I said earlier, all 8 of his extra turns has fixed speed, which are based on his base speed. So if you increase his base speed, the extra turns gets a bit of speed increase as well. But mostly it won't be that important unless you are trying to zero cycle. The second best is going to be the F2P Herta Stow Lightcone. This is a great F2P option, which gives huge amount of attack and damage boost. But since he already gets so much of that inside his ultimate, getting more of the same type of buffs doesn't really increase his damage by that much. As a result, it's not as close to his signature. There are other options that I have listed in the chart, but those are not as good as the Herta Stow Lightcone. For relics, there's again two options. One is the Wave Strider Captain set, which gives crit damage and a huge amount of attack for one turn, which is not an issue for Phainon because all of his buffs remain active throughout his ultimate. So basically, this is kind of a tailor-made set for Phainon. The other option is the Scholar Lost in Erudition set. It's your generic crit and damage set. It's super universal and only around 4 to 5% worse than the Captain set, but those differences can be filled with better substats. So just choose the set which gives you better stats. For ornaments, here as well there are two options. First is the Arcadia of the Woven Dream set, which gives more damage boost based on the number of missing units on the field. And since within Phainon's ultimate, only he is present on the field, he can activate the passive. The other option is the Rutilin Arena set, which gives crit rate, basic attack and skill damage boost, which is all the damage that Phainon does. There is little to no damage difference between these two sets, so if you already have Rutilin Arena set pieces, then there is literally no reason to farm for the Arcadia set. For stats, go for the usual DPS build. Use crit rate or damage on the body, speed or attack on the boots. Physical damage is better for the orb, but you can also use attack if you don't have a physical damage piece. And lastly, use attack on the rope. For his stats, just build your normal DPS stats: high attack, crit rate and crit damage. The only stat that you need to worry about is the speed. Now typically speed is not a useful stat for Phainon because inside his ultimate, all of his extra turns are based on his base speed, so having attack on the boots is better. But there is a situation where a speed boost is kinda necessary, and that is when you are trying to do a zero cycle run. In such cases, you want to generate core flames as fast as possible, so building a fast enough Phainon like over 134 speed is recommended. But unless you are trying to do a zero cycle, using attack on the boots is always better, especially with the release of Cyrene, where she can simply activates Phainon's ultimate without needing any core flame generation. And since with her buff, Phainon basically never comes out of his transformation, any speed stats becomes even more useless. So unless you're trying to do a zero cycle, just go with attack on the boots. By the way, if you're enjoying the content, please consider subscribing, as it does help the channel grow and motivates me to make more content for you guys. Now let's talk about teams, and this is also one of the reasons why I recommend any new player who doesn't have 2 or more main DPS units to pull for Phainon. Currently, Phainon has a few team options, ranging from a full premium team to decent alternatives, and both have their places. The original best team for him is with Sunday, Bronya and Ceridra. All of them are great hypercarry supports that greatly benefits Phainon's damage. One of these three, Bronya, is a free unit that you can get through your 300 pull selector or just buy her from the shop with this special currency. As for the other two, both Sunday and Ceridra are great supports that provide value to any account regardless if you have Phainon or not, so I'd recommend you to pull for them anyways. Ceridra is a bit more niche because she heavily focuses on skill damage, but she does have other units like Anaxa that also benefits from her. And since both Sunday and Ceridra had their banners quite some time ago, you can expect their rerun sometime in the near future. Who knows, Ceridra might have a rerun in the next patch. And this is only one of the teams that Phainon has. With the release of game modes such as Aenorm Arbitration, this is not Phainon's best team anymore. Since all the enemies deal so much damage and have so much HP, the battles are much longer than your usual MOC runs. And as such, with no sustain units, your team eventually starts dying. And even inside Phainon's ultimate, though he can heal with his attacks, some enemies hit so hard and so frequently that he ends up exiting his transformation state before the 8th extra turn. And for these situations, a sustain is very much required. And for that, we have the free unit Danang PT. He is currently one of the best sustain for any attack scaling team, and is the best sustain for Phainon. He can provide thick shields even inside Phainon's ultimate, and also provide some extra damage. Another easy free-to-play teammate is RMC. His true damage buff scales really well with Phainon, and the action advance is great for core flame generation. Now if you did pull for Cyrene, the latest banner unit that came out this patch, then she becomes one of Phainon's best supports, and in my opinion, she builds Phainon's most universal team. Basically, Cyrene can activate all allies' ultimate when she uses her own ultimate. That means Phainon doesn't need to generate any core flame. Also, Cyrene provides this unique buff to Phainon where once Phainon enters his transformation, that state will never end. Instead, after the 8th extra turn, all the turns will reset. This basically gives Phainon a permanent ultimate state with some extra damage buffs. And this is why I said she makes Phainon's most universal team. Initially, the premium team with Sunday, Bronya and Saridra was the best team in terms of damage, and it still kinda is. But that team cannot be used in Enorm Arbitration, especially in the King stage, since you definitely need a sustain for that. And for those situations, a team with Cyrene, Saridra and Danang PT is more universal, because it can be used in every game mode in HSR. Now it does require you to have both Cyrene and Saridra, but you can also use RMC in place of her until you get Saridra in the future. Having Saridra is definitely better for more damage, but the difference is not so significant that you absolutely need her. The only place where Saridra is kinda needed is when you are trying to zero cycle with Phainon. But aside from that, a team like this with 2 free-to-play units is more than good enough to clear any content in the game. Another point why I recommend pulling for Phainon, especially for newer players, is because how broken his transformation state is. Inside his ultimate, Phainon gets total immunity from any crowd control debuffs, and since his actions are fixed based on his base speed, he doesn't really get affected by mechanics that affects most other DPS units. Recently in the current rotation of Enorm Arbitration, we had stages with heavy crowd control debuffs and action delays, which really messed up most team rotations. But for Phainon, he just bypasses all of that. And if you have Cyrene, he gets to have that transformation state permanently. It makes it so much easier to get through most of the annoying mechanics that all these new enemies have. It also makes his gameplay a lot more predictable. Now I'm not saying that in a bad way or anything. I basically mean, since he doesn't get affected by CC, you don't face a situation where your rotation doesn't perform the way you thought it would because of all that crowd control or one of your allies dying. Since with Phainon, he is the only one present on the field, he can heal with his attacks, and with Danang PT, he also gets constant shields. All of his buffs remain active throughout his extra turns, and he is not affected by any crowd control mechanics. As such, any kind of rotations that you think of, play exactly the way you want it to. That's why I recommend a new player who doesn't already have 2 or more DPS units to pull for Phainon, because it makes their early game challenges much more fun than annoying. Now if you already have Phainon and are planning for vertical investment, then here's what I recommend. We have already talked about his signature Lightcone, so let's go through his initial Eidolons. His E1 increases the percentage speed that his extra turns get, and it increases based on the number of enemies defeated. It also gives 50% crit damage when using his ultimate. Now the crit damage is not that insane, as he already gets those buffs from other sources like Saridra, RMC or even Sunday. But the speed increase does provide him with more frequent turns, resulting in more damage. As for his E2, this gives him 20% rest pen, which scales really well with his damage because it's not the generic damage or attack increase buff. Also, when using the bounce attack skill with 4 scorch points, which should always be the case, Phainon gets an extra turn, and this is addition to his 8 extra turns. So basically, more turns inside his ultimate, resulting in more damage. Now this does depend on the number of scorch points. If there are always at least 4 enemies on the field, and you can use his counter attack skill to generate 4 scorch points instantly, then this becomes a broken Eidolon, because he can simply alternate between his counter attack and bounce attack, and can get up to 14 extra turns inside his ultimate. This is crazy strong in the right situation, like Pure Fiction, or against specific bosses who spawns a lot of mobs. So what should you get first? From my experience, I'd recommend his signature Lightcone first. His E1 does provide some extra speed, but so does his signature. And on top of that, his signature provides much better damage buffs like Defense Igno that scales better with Phainon than the 50% crit damage that his E1 gives. After that, I would recommend pulling for Saridra actually, because she can provide a similar effect as his E2 with extra damage buffs. She is one of Phainon's core supports, and after getting his signature, she is the best investment you can have for him. After you get them both, or if you already plan on pulling Saridra, Then for his Eidolons, only pull for them if you are planning to go for his E2. His E1 is not worth it on its own. The damage difference between his E1 and E0 is mostly around 25% based on the number of enemies you have defeated, because that increases his speed. As for his E2, it more than doubles his damage with all the extra turns. So if you are considering pulling for Eidolons, I recommend only doing so if you plan on going for his E2. Overall, Phainon's values have changed quite a bit from his initial release, at least in my experience. Initially, he had one of the most specific and premium team in the whole game, where if you didn't have those specific units, his damage would drop significantly. But now with the new game modes and units like Dahnang PT and Cyrene, his teams have become more forgiving, which is always great for anyone who is just starting out. And that's all for this updated review of Phainon. Hopefully this answered any questions you had about him. If you still have any other issue, you can leave it in the comments and I'll try my best to answer them. Like and sub if you enjoy my content. Thanks a lot for watching and I'll see you guys in the next one.